Looks like I'm talking about the Rinnegan today. So alright, the Rinnegan. Where do I even begin with this thing? There's quite a lot to talk about here. I guess a place better than any other to start out with would be the name. Rinnegan translates to Samsara-ai, as the prefix Rinne is the Japanese word for Samsara. Now, for those of you who don't know what Samsara is, it is not a Japanese concept, though it is an Eastern one. Samsara refers to the process of reincarnation or rebirth, and it has its roots in many Indian religions, particularly Buddhism and Hinduism. Now, the Rinnegan's ties to this concept run deeper than just in its name. Each of the paths from the Rinnegan Six Paths technique are named after one of the 6 samsaric realms of reincarnation. The strength, abilities, and artillery of each of the paths are directly related to whichever realm they're named after, but I will get into that later. For now, I'm gonna go ahead and discuss how the Rinnegan is acquired. So to explain this, I've got to go way back to the time of Kaguya and the Sage of Six Paths. When Kaguya first ate the fruit of the Shinju, she was granted chakra, and a lot of it at that. As a matter of fact, she was given all the chakra, like literally all of it. And with this chakra came a multitude of abilities. Now, one of these abilities was called the Rinne Sharingan, and it came in the form of a third eye that manifested on her forehead. Kaguya's son, Hagoromo Otsutsuki, who is better known as the Sage of Six Paths, inherited the Rinnegan from his mother, but not the Rinne Sharingan. Now, Hagoromo later gained access to the Rinne Sharingan when he became the Jinchuriki of the Tin Tails, but he didn't inherit it directly from his mother. The best explanation for why this may have happened is probably just that Kaguya's chakra was diluted and split as it continued to be passed down through her family. This is supported by the fact that the Rinnegan and the Byakugan were split up between Kaguya's kids, Hagoromo and Hamura, and furthermore by the fact that one of Hagoromo's sons, Indra, inherited the Sharingan and not the Rinnegan. Anyway, this finally brings me to the actual process of acquiring the Rinnegan. Now, there are multiple methods of gaining the Rinnegan, but they're all really difficult. So, the first method is to eat the fruit of the Shinju tree. However, that's impossible, since the Shinju tree merged with Kaguya and became the Tin Tails before being split into 9 separate tailed beasts who were eventually sealed into 9 different people. The second method is to be directly approached by the Sage of Six Paths and receive the yin half of his chakra, but, well, that's not gonna happen for most people. Another known way to acquire the Rinnegan is to recreate the chakra of the Sage of Six Paths, and it's possible to do this by merging the chakra of his 2 sons, Indra and Ashura. Since the respective chakras of Indra and Ashura have reincarnated into various people throughout the history of the Naruto universe, it's also possible to awaken the Rinnegan by merging the chakras of 2 of Indra and Ashura's reincarnates. It is worth noting, however, that the results will not be immediate, as when Maru Uchiha did this by combining his chakra with Hashirama Senju's, it took a good few decades for his Rinnegan to actually awaken. Also, acquiring the Rinnegan might require you to have the Sharingan as a prerequisite, since it's implied a couple times throughout the series that the Rinnegan is the successor to the Sharingan. And as with any other dojutsu, it's possible to acquire a Rinnegan through an eye transplant, but, well, for this to work, you have to find somebody who has a Rinnegan and doesn't want it. On top of that, transplanted Rinnegan aren't all that easy to use either. When deciding who the next carrier of his Rinnegan should be, Madara specifically chose a member of the Uzumaki clan, and this is important because Uzumaki are touted as some of the most durable, tenacious people out there, and they also have a notably high amount of chakra. This was no coincidence either. Madara wanted to make sure that the person inheriting his Rinnegan was going to have enough chakra to use it and be durable enough to use it. This is further supported by the fact that Obito, another Uchiha, flat out said that he couldn't physically handle the power of both of Madara's Rinnegan, and as a result, he was forced to hide one of them away. So yeah, getting the Rinnegan isn't very easy at all. However, for anyone who can manage to obtain the Rinnegan, it's well worth going through all the trouble to do it. The Rinnegan is incredibly powerful. Some of the Rinnegan's lesser abilities include the ability to see chakra, the ability to create black chakra receivers that can transmit chakra and even control people, and Nagato even showed the ability to master all ninjutsu that he was taught, covering all 5 basic nature transformations and yang release. Oh yeah, and keep in mind, Nagato was just 10 years old when he did this. But without question, the most powerful technique that the Rinnegan provides is the Six Paths technique. And now, calling this a technique isn't really accurate, because the Six Paths technique is more like a family of techniques than an individual one. Now, as you'd expect with a name like the Six Paths technique, there are 6 different branches which all of the abilities granted by the technique are categorized under. These branches are more properly referred to as paths, and each of them are named after one of the 6 samsaric realms of reincarnation, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video. These 6 paths include include the Diva Path, the Asura Path, the Human Path, the Animal Path, the Preta Path, and the Naraka Path. Now, I have no idea whether this was intentional or not, but the hierarchy of the 6 realms of Samsara seems to be reflected in the hierarchy of the 6 paths of the Rinnegan. The heavenly realms, Diva and Asura, are the most powerful paths of the Rinnegan, and the hellish realms, Naraka and Preta, are the least powerful paths of the Rinnegan. Now, that said, the Naraka Path and the Preta Path are still pretty OP. The Naraka Path grants a Rinnegan wielder the ability to summon the King of Hell, and with the King of Hell, the summoner can interrogate others and restore injuries. Like most aspects of the Rinnegan, the Naraka Path is influenced heavily by Eastern mythology, as Naraka is pretty much the Hindu equivalent of Hell, and in Naraka resides a lovely fellow by the name of Yama. Now, Yama is the King of Hell, or the Lord of Justice, and people are brought before him to explain their sins so he can think of a proper punishment for them. Now, if the person brought before Yama lies to him, he will rip out their tongue as a form of punishment. This is pretty much exactly what the King of Hell does in the series. If the Naraka Path asks a person a question and they refuse to answer or lie to him, the King of Hell will rip out their tongue and effectively kill them immediately. The King of Hell also has the ability to heal any injuries of a body he ingests. Now, while putting your body inside of this thing's mouth is probably pretty intimidating, there's no need to worry because he flawlessly heals all injuries. Like, you could go in with a distorted body missing an arm and a leg and you would come out just fine. The Preta Path is capable of absorbing and thereby nullifying ninjutsu in any form. As a result, it is often used for long-range defense, but it can be used for taijutsu blitzing since the Preta Path allows for chakra absorption through physical contact with another person. The ability to absorb chakra is likely influenced by the Preta creatures native to the Preta realm in Buddhism. Preta are humanoids that suffer from a perpetual feeling of hunger and thirst that they will never be able to satisfy, and Naruto could have very easily symbolized this in the form of the Preta Path's constant hunger for chakra. And whoo boy, this is where we get to the really OP stuff. Coming up next is the Human Path, which allows a Rinnegan wielder to literally rip out a person's soul. It is primarily used for information gathering, as the process of ripping out somebody's soul allows a Rinnegan wielder to read that person's mind, but this also doubles as an instant kill ability since ripping out somebody's soul kills them immediately. The Animal Path grants a Rinnegan wielder access to some of the most powerful summons in the Naruto universe. These summons include a giant multi-headed dog that sprouts more heads every time it takes damage, a giant panda that can be used to shield a Rinnegan wielder from just about any damage, a giant drill-beaked bird that the Rinnegan wielder can fly upon, a giant chameleon, a giant ox, a giant rhino, a giant crab, and the Animal Path even allows a person to summon other people, as shown when Nagato used it to summon the other paths of pain in addition to Conan. On top of that, the animals summoned by the Animal Path seem to be completely immortal, as even if they are killed, they can just be summoned again pretty much immediately afterwards. And furthermore, a user of the Animal Path can see through the eyes of all of the creatures that they summon, making it nigh impossible to attack the summoner from a blind spot. The Animal Path is likely the most direct reference to the concept of Samsara, as in Buddhism, animals who served humans were doomed to be reincarnated into animals again, which is flawlessly represented in the immortality of the animals that the Rinnegan allows a person to summon. The Asura Path allows a person to sprout 4 extra arms and fire fucking missiles and laser beams. Seriously, the Asura Path is absolutely ridiculous. It gives the user access to a bunch of different weapons, including the aforementioned missiles and laser beams, on top of a bunch of extra weapons like blades, rocket arms, jet propulsion, and a bunch of other stuff. Additionally, the Asura Path grants the user the ability to sprout 2 extra faces, which of course increases that user's field of vision by quite a bit. The Asura Path takes inspiration from both Buddhism and Hinduism, as its 3-headed, 6-armed appearance is a reference to a common depiction of Asura in Buddhism, and the Asura people in Hinduism had an ability called Astra that allowed them to use magical equivalents to modern-day missiles and such. Among the 6 paths, the one that is inarguably the most powerful is the Diva Path, which grants a Rinnegan wielder control over attractive and repulsive forces. This control comes in the form of 3 main techniques: Shinra Tensei, Bansho Tenin, and Chibaku Tensei. Shinra Tensei is the manifestation of the Rinnegan's ability to manipulate repulsive forces and is an omnidirectional wave of force that pushes things back with a variable amount of range and power. The size and destructive capacity of a Shinra Tensei wave are directly proportional to the amount of chakra poured into it. While the exact scope of the possible size and strength of the Shinra Tensei isn't known, Nagato has made the technique into everything from a small barrier that lightly pushes enemies away to a catastrophic wave of force capable of destroying all of Konoha. The only downside to Shinra Tensei is that users must wait at least 5 seconds between uses, so it can't be used repeatedly. This cooldown timer will be even longer with more chakra-intensive uses of Shinra Tensei as well, but nonetheless, the technique remains an indispensable asset for both offense and defense. Bansho Tenin is the complete polar opposite of Shinra Tensei. It is a unidirectional wave of force that pulls people and objects toward the user as opposed to pushing them away from them. Now, I don't know what the exact range of the technique is, but I do know that it can be used to attract multiple targets at once. Additionally, it has the same 5-second cooldown timer as Shinra Tensei does, and I don't think it's possible to increase this timer since Bansho Tenin has a static power and range. The next ability, Chibaku Tensei, is easily the most powerful ability granted by the Rinnegan. Like Bansho Tenin, it makes use of the Rinnegan's ability to control attractive forces, but on a completely different scale. The technique allows the user to create a black gravity sphere that they can release into the air freely. Once they do, everything nearby, with the exception of the user of the technique, will be pulled into the gravity sphere, which includes people, objects, pieces of the planet. This will continue to happen until enough is clung on to the black gravity sphere, which will eventually result in the creation of a small planetoid. Characters with the chakra of the Sage of Six Paths have shown the ability to create more than one gravity sphere at once. When Madara did this, he used it to create multiple planetoids that he immediately dropped on Naruto and Sasuke during their battle. And when Sasuke did it, he used it to seal all 9-tailed beasts inside of the planetoids created by Chibaku Tensei. Nagato has also shown the ability to use telekinesis through the Diva Path in ways that are clearly distinct from Shinra Tensei and Bansho Tenin. For example, he managed to lift Hinata off of the ground before throwing her back into it with enough force to nearly kill her. On top of that, he displays the ability to fly, which no other Rinnegan user has been able to manage, so I can only assume that Nagato's experience with the Rinnegan allowed him to use telekinesis to levitate in the air. That's just a hypothesis though, so don't take it as 100% fact. Also, despite the name of the Six Paths technique, there is a 7th path that users of the Rinnegan have access to called the Outer Path. With the Outer Path, wielders of the Rinnegan can summon the demonic statue of the Outer Path, also referred to as the Gedo statue, create black receivers that they can transmit their chakra through, which they can use to control up to 6 different bodies at the same time. As a matter of fact, Nagato used this technique to control up to 6 corpses at once and dubbed them his 6 Paths of Pain. It's also possible to distribute the powers of one of the first 6 paths of the 6 Paths technique to each of the bodies being controlled, though this will cause the person controlling the individual bodies to lose access to the powers themselves. On the flip side, it is possible to control up to 6 bodies at once without giving them access to the powers of the Rinnegan, as shown when Obito controlled 6 Jinchuriki at the same time and allowed them to keep all of their original jutsu without giving them access to any of the Rinnegan's abilities. In either case, the person controlling the bodies is able to share vision with the bodies being controlled, greatly increasing their field of vision and allowing them to dominate the battlefield by eliminating any blind spots. Users of the Outer Path can also use the Samsara of Heavenly Life technique, which allows them to bring 1 or more people back from the dead. This technique is distinctly different from the Edo Tensei technique, as it actually returns the soul of the person being revived to the realm of the living. However, more often than not, use of this technique will cost a Rinnegan wielder their life, so it's not used very often. Like the Mangekyo Sharingan, the Rinnegan also seems to give each person that awakens it personalized abilities. Madara possessed the ability to project clones of himself into the invisible world of Limbo. Attacks from these clones looked like nothing more than invisible acts of force, and it wasn't until Naruto and Sasuke gained 6 Paths powers that they were able to tell that the clones were there at all. Sasuke's Rinnegan allows him to switch places with objects that are within his field of vision, though his Rinnegan is distinctly different from Madara's and the Sage of Six Paths since it is lined with Tomo similar to a Sharingan. Momoshiki's Rinnegan allowed him to absorb ninjutsu through one palm and then released that same jutsu from the other palm. I'm not sure what the abilities of Hagoromo or Kaguya were, as they were never shown, but I'm sure they were probably pretty cool. Speaking of Kaguya, as I mentioned earlier, when she ate the fruit of the Shinju tree, she was given access to the Rinne Sharingan, and I still haven't explained what the Rinne Sharingan is. Well, it's actually surprisingly just like what you'd expect. Just a blend between the Rinnegan and the Sharingan. It has the visual prowess of the Sharingan and the abilities of the Rinnegan. There is one key ability that the Rinne Sharingan gives a person access to, and that is the ability to cast the Infinite Tsukuyomi on the moon. Since it is reflected on the moon, the Infinite Tsukuyomi is a genjutsu that will trap everybody across the planet inside of it. The only way to resist it is to have a Rinnegan yourself, but considering how hard I explained it is to acquire one, that probably won't be an issue for somebody casting the Infinite Tsukuyomi. And aside from that, there really isn't anything else to talk about. I think I've covered pretty much everything. There is the matter of how certain Rinnegan look different from others, but I mean, there's not really much to discuss there. Sasuke's has Tomo, Madara's and the Sage of Six Paths are just purple, Momoshiki's is red, but that's about all there is to say about it. So, that said, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If there's anything I missed, don't hesitate to let me know in the comments below, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below. If you have any requests for topics you'd like me to cover in future videos like this, feel free to let me know in the comments, and I will see if I can get to it sometime in the near future. This has been Swag Kage. I hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you guys next time. Swag Kage out. Bye.